Hey, welcome to Tackle Some Fishing. I'm Michael Becker.
Mitch Roth.
Today we are at Fin Feather Fur Outfitters in Rossford, Ohio. Thanking our buddy Kevin Renner, who runs the fishing department here. He's also one of our tackle guys. If you're unfamiliar with tackle, it's Toledo Area Kayak Anglers League. We're a kayak fishing league, human powered. Check us out on Facebook. Kevin is actually our Angler of the Year winner from last year, and he can be found on his YouTube page, Catching with Kevin. Again, we're here at Fin Feather Fur Outfitters. They're one of our main sponsors. They were last year, they were this year. Today we're doing top 5 lures we use in Ohio. So I'm gonna let Mitchell kick it off here.
So going with number 5, now this is a lure, it's probably of the ones I'm going to show today, the one I've used the longest and most successfully, and that's the jitterbug. Only topwater lure I've had any consistency on with my entire life, and the topwater bite in Ohio is always inconsistent, but for me the jitterbug has always caught bigger bass, and in particular the just all black. I think when you get caught up in colors for topwater, especially in low light conditions, you can just confuse yourself on what you think it's going to work. Most of the time I'm throwing a jitterbug, there's almost no light, so it really doesn't matter. That's why I just use the one that doesn't have any color to it, and that's always worked the best for me. You can buy 30 different colors, but you should just buy one that's black, one that's white. That's probably going to cover all your bases, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, topwater bite, what a fun bait. I got into it a little bit more last year. My number 5 category, I actually have 2 lures for it because I kind of went crankbait with my number 5, and I got 2 of them here. As I was making this list, I was trying to think of, okay, what baits do I use throughout the year? Starting in the spring, ending in fall, late fall, that I have confidence still going to catch me some fish and have caught me some fish. Crankbait's one of those, but I'm going to start with the Booyah One Knocker in the Tiger Craw color. Mostly for spring, late fall a little bit, but in the spring, boy, with all our grass lakes up here, you rip this through grass, rip it over the grass. This one sinks a little bit. Again, the weight you have, it's a one knocker, a lot of noise in there, and I have caught a bunch of fish on this one. Next one is a square bill, and I'm gonna look at this one because it's got a lot of bits. It's a Lucky Craft. It's got a knock in it also. I believe it's a one knocker. The total description is, and I'm not even going to find, floating chartreuse shad. So this one, floats like a lot of your square bills will. You get it hooked. Again, I've caught fish ripping it over grass. Anywhere you throw a square bill, this one is dynamite. It's got a nice color on it. I like that chartreuse shad color. Sometimes it's got a little different sound than some of your other square bills, and you fish pressured lakes. I found when I discovered this one, it was on a highly pressured lake. It was late in the year. I said, let's throw something that maybe no one else is throwing or has in a while, give the fish a little something to hear and look at, and I caught a bunch of them that weekend. So there's my number 5 or some crankbaits for you.
All right, go to number 4. I got the Berkley Slobber Knocker. Now, a lot of people would just say chatterbait, and I'm not going to, because the chatterbait is a specific kind of bladed jig, and for myself, I've never had a ton of luck on chatterbaits. Specifically, I've thrown jackhammers, haven't had a luck on those, but this Berkley Slobber Knocker, I started throwing it last year, and I caught some of the biggest bass that I've caught out of a kayak on that lure. I didn't catch a ton of fish on it, but my biggest fish from last year, and 2 of the fish that I put in my top 10 for the year were on this lure, and particularly this green pumpkin color. I also like the black and blue is really good, and this year I'm going to throw the fire craw, which is always a popular color, early in spring. I didn't use one of these lures till late May, so I'm kind of interested to try it out earlier this year. In particular, a couple bodies of water in northwest Ohio where red seems to work really well. As far as the trailer goes, I like a split fin trailer on it, or I'll do like a paddle tail like just about everybody in the country does. So I don't keep it too crazy there, but one of my tips I always say, make sure you're buying the same brand trailer when you're using, if they have one, because the color scheme will be similar. It's not because like, oh, you can't put that color with that brand with that brand, but a lot of times their color patterns are similar, so it looks more realistic in that manner. Not really, you don't have to be, oh, you can only use this brand with this line and that. It just looks better. I think it looks more realistic to the fish.
So my number four, sorry, I put 5 up there, 4, Texas rig worm. Specifically for me, as I do Missile Baits quiver worm. This is a 6.5 inch little single tail worm here. It's ribbed. You can kind of see that. I don't know if you can see that or not. This particular color, plutonium green pumpkin. I don't even know what plutonium is. I know there's green pumpkin. It's like a lot of different colors. When you look at me, I struggle in the color category. I am colorblind, so I kind of go what it tells me on the package, and it sounded cool. It's got some green pumpkin on it. I throw it out. Typical how you Texas rig anything. This can also be used on a Ned rig. You could use it on a Nico rig. You can use it on a drop shot. There are many different ways to fish this. Again, I mostly fish at weedless Texas rig. Caught a lot of fish on this when they're a little bit pressured and stuff like that. And you know, any place you throw a worm, curly-tailed worm, maybe whatever you want, this kind of a straight tail. It's got this little flapper on here that moves around. These ribs move the water. There's some other colors I like too, but this is the one I mostly go to. Again, that Missile Baits quiver worm.
Cool. Well, to keep in the category of soft plastics, this is actually the only soft plastic in my top 5, and that is a purple worm. Now, this is also one of the only lures I use that's a slightly unnatural color. Almost every lure I throw is going to be realistic colors or red, but once again, bass see red well. But for whatever reason, over the years, this purple worm, this one in particular right here, it's a non-weedless 3-hook pre-rigged worm. It's very small. I mean, the biggest one I'll typically throw is like half the length of your hand, maybe 3 or 4 inches. But this lure has saved me so many times over the years, especially for tournaments, that I mean, I don't know if I've gone one tournament without at least catching one fish on it, particularly in the summer. It's not something I really throw until late June, but there's a couple lakes in Northwest Ohio where I've had days where I've caught 50 fish on this, but I've had to use 7 of them because the bass just absolutely destroy them. It's weird because it's such a, like, I don't want to say boring, but just it doesn't do a lot. I throw it on a finesse setup with just a swivel snap. It's very unorthodox. Not a lot of people do it, but it just catches fish, and it's caught me really big fish too. You get a lot of small ones, but on a day that's hot, bright blue skies, they won't hit anything. This is my last resort bait, and there's been times where I've gone from catching nothing to then I caught 30. So it's a great one, but it is more situational. That's why I can't go any higher than 3. But over the years, it's been the most consistent lure. I don't think I've gone a year in the last 15 that I haven't caught a bass on this lure.
Yeah, he's been telling me about that lure for about a year now. I walk by it all the time and going, you know, I got to try one of those. One of these days I'm going to pick one up, throw it in that box. And those days that I'm going to test his theory. I believe it though, because you know he said not a lot of people are using it. Something the bass aren't seeing. It looks pretty natural.
I've only ever even seen 2 brands of it. That's the.
Sure.
This is like the original. This is. My grandpa used to tell me about this one. This is the Kelly's. He called it a Kelly plow jockey. No, I don't think this one's called Kelly's Firetail Action. I almost think it's like a local lure because I've never seen them in other parts of the country. The only other brand I know of is Bass Stopper, which is up in Michigan. So okay. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah. My number 3, again, sticking with baits I throw all year long. I also try to think of, you know, when I go fishing, what do most bass up here eat? Predominantly bluegill. There's a ton of bluegill in the places we fish. Yep. So I try to think something that might look like a bluegill. Again, what does a bluegill look like to me might be what it looks like something different to someone else. So I go by, what does it say on the package? But swim jigs. I think swim jigs do an excellent job of mimicking a bluegill. This one is the Strike King swim jig, actually in bluegill color. There's many other swim jigs you can throw, but this one here, deadly. You can fish it shallow, you can, you know, let it sink down. You can fish. The great things about swim jigs, you can do anything with them. You can swim it, you know, swim it. You can throw it out there and let it sink. Fish it like a jig. It'll come through grass. It'll come through cover. These things are great. Trailers I put them on. Go back to his idea of matching companies. I like to use the Menace two-tail grub from Strike King, the bluegill color. The way I don't know if I can get this open, but the way I like to hook these. I don't think I have another one. Sorry, I should have planned that a little bit better. I'm not going to rip this open because this is a off the shelf here. But I don't do them with the tails. I do them with the tails as vertical, I guess it would say. So they look like this when they're flapping. Because in my mind, again, I'm trying to imitate that bluegill. A bluegill's tail doesn't look like this. It looks like this. So, and I predominantly swim my swim jigs, pulling it through there. Again, any time of year, you can throw it almost anywhere. I catch fish on it.
That's I could have picked 6. A swim jig of some variety probably would have been mine. Particularly like a finesse swim jig. I throw those a lot, but I typically don't catch big fish with it. But one of my favorite to throw. Now my number 2 is a situational lure, for me anyway. But in that situation, it beats everything else. So that is a lipless crankbait, particularly golden black. This is a Spro. The size I like is this one, about a 5/8. So that size is really nice. I don't like the lighter ones and I don't like the really heavy ones. Somewhere in the middle is perfect. And the golden black color last year, it caught me so many bass early on in the year. I had 2 different days where that was the only thing they would bite. I threw 5 different other colors, but all they would hit was golden black. And previously it was always red lipless. Most years that I've used a lipless crankbait, but this past year, the golden black just absolutely blew the doors off of all the other color schemes I had. I don't know why, but to me, gold isn't really like a color per se, but it's the flash it presents is what really attracts the bass. And the sound that it makes, along with just how you fish it. There's so many different ways you can fish a lipless crankbait besides just reeling it in. I've always had a lot of luck with burning it, but also snapping it too out of grass has produced a lot of bites for me over the years. So that's number 2.
Yeah, and if you heard one thing pretty in common here after that, if you're fishing in the spring in this part of Ohio, or probably any part of Ohio, we'll give a little seek around and everyone will be doing it and we'll lose all their tournaments, stuff like that, but that's okay. I like having other people catch fish. A lipless crankbait. You throw a lipless crankbait in April and May and some parts of March, you're going to catch fish in Northwest Ohio.
Yep.
There's no doubt about it. You can throw it anywhere. And you can yo-yo it, you can throw it however you want. You can just throw it out and reel it in. You're going to catch fish on a lipless crankbait in Ohio. My number 2, stickworm. Predominantly, a lot of guys use the Yamato Senko, the Senkos. That's the popular ones. Some other ones, which are great. But if you've used them, if you don't use a little O-ring on them or something like that, if you just put them on a hook and throw them out, you might get 2-3 casts out of them and they're going to fly off. I've used the Berkeley ones, the same thing. Or you catch 1 fish and you're going to have to rig another one. And they're also expensive, so you're going through a lot. So you can buy the O-ring and stuff like that. To me, that just seems like more work, which I could probably do. I've discovered these. These are the Z-Man Zinkers. If you're familiar with Z-Man material, it's elastic. That thing will stretch all day long, and you can fish one of these all day long. The color I like that I've really fallen in love with, mud bug. I don't even know what color this is, but it's about as dull looking as you can be. Again, sometimes you stretch it a little bit, get it worked up and stuff like that. You can wacky rig it, this style here, Texas rig it to make it more weedless. Actually, that's how I fished it more than commonly. But this thing, he was saying his little worm that he uses when it's slow. If it's slow and I'm not catching anything, I rig this thing up one way or the other in this color, no matter what time of year it is, and I'll catch a fish. I'll catch something, I'll put that day where you're not catching anything. I said, okay, let's pull out the mud bug and throw it out there. Sure enough, I'll catch at least one, makes me feel a little bit better. But again, this thing will last you all day. Don't leave them in the sun. When you're done with them at the end of the day, you will have to take them off and throw them away, because if they're out in the sun, if you're familiar with, again, Z-Man products.
Don't put it with another soft plastic.
Don't put it with any other soft plastics. I leave
melt.
them in the package. But yeah, if you're familiar, that's all Z-Man products, if you guys know that. But the mud bug zinkers, again, for a wacky rig, it catches fish and it lasts all day.
And if you want a great creek lure, the Z-Man Canada Craw color for like the mini Ned rig or the Craw Z little guys, that is a awesome lure for creeks and small rivers. I've caught tons of smallmouth on that. variety, and rock bass seem to absolutely
Oh, yeah.
love it. But my number one, this lure has always been one of my favorite lures, not for bass. It was my favorite pike lure for a decade plus. And then 2 years ago, I started throwing it just happenstance for bass, and I had one of my best days ever out. And then this past 2 years, it was unbelievable how many fish I would catch on it. And I was always telling people, and they're just like, not a lot of people are throwing this lure, and it's got some of its popularity back recently, but it's one of those classic lures that's been around forever. It catches fish, and it's fallen out of favor because of the chatterbait. That's a spinnerbait, and particularly I like a 1/2 ounce spinnerbait. And this color scheme, this one's a strike king, and if you look at the color, it's sort of like a gray natural looking color. I only really throw 2 colors of spinnerbait 90% of the time, and that's a natural looking color, like a grayish, and then like a green pumpkin. And that's really it. And honestly, you could probably get away with just those 2, unless you're fishing really, really dark water. Then I might put a white or a black spinnerbait on. But that 1/2 ounce size with a paddle tail grub on the back, it just catches fish over and over and over again. Of my top 5 bass, I'm talking about my top 10 last year, 4 of my top 5 were on a spinnerbait, and 6 of my top 10 were on a spinnerbait. If I did a top 20, 15 of them probably would have been on a spinnerbait. It's just the best tournament I ever had. My top 5 fish, this was actually a day we were out at the same place together. The first 3 fish I caught were all over 18 inches. And 2 of them, back to back, basically, were on the spinnerbait. And then the other one was on a paddle tail grub, like with the finesse swim jig I was talking about earlier. But the spinnerbait, around here anyway, it does really, really well. My PB's on a spinnerbait, one exactly like this exact style. And that I caught in a not very big place. It was a 20+ inch bass, and it was on a 1/2 ounce spinnerbait with a paddle tail grub. It catches fish. You gotta have a trailer on it. I didn't use a trailer on it for bass for many years, and I think part of the reason why I didn't catch a lot, or I had a lot of small fish go after it. I think that bigger profile eliminates some of the small ones. Very rarely do I catch a fish that isn't a keeper on a spinnerbait. And when I used to fish pike, I never used a trailer because the pike would just destroy the trailer, so there's literally no point. But for bass, you can get a lot of use out of that trailer, so that's number 1 for me, for sure.
Yeah, and he was talking about size and his best. I'm going to quickly go back to that mud bug zinkers. Last year in our tackle tournaments, this little thing, 2 of my biggest fish, it won 2 big bass and basically won 2 tournaments for me last year just throwing this thing. So, all these other ones I've had, I put more numbers in sometimes. I can get a lot of numbers on 2. But every once in a while, you'll get a big one that'll just engulf this thing. But that comes down to my number 1. Kind of heard him mention, can't do a video without him anymore, I think, and that is the chatterbait. I particularly do like, I've tried some other ones, they're all good. I like the jackhammer. The hype, I guess maybe I bought into it. I like it. I like the hook. I like the trapper, I like the keeper, the trailer keeper. I like the hook on it. I like the startup speed. You throw this thing and it starts, chattering the minute it starts moving. The chatter, boy, you can feel it. It's a pretty aggressive bait. The color I like, going back to that bluegill color. Now, I don't know if this is a bluegill color, but I really like the bee height to light. I put different kinds of trailer on there. I like kind of a natural gill trailer. I'm going to show you the trailers in a little bit here that I really like, but again, numbers and size on this one too. And even sometimes my trailer, it's called the natural gill color, actually from missile baits. I'm going to get into this color here because I'm going to cheat in here, and I got more baits in one category here. I don't know, the fish just seem to like it, so I go with that. And I'm going to quickly go into, again, what you can get here right at Fin, Feather, and Fur. All these baits that we're showing today you can purchase right here. I'm going to quickly, springtime, red. Mitchell mentioned red earlier. This has got a little bit of orange on the blade and stuff like that. And the trailers I like for these, Missile Baits has them, Hog Farmer's another bait, the Spunk Shad. Boy, this thing is as simple looking as you could be. People first look at that trailer and go like, what does it do? I've seen underwater videos of this thing. this tail is going crazy under the water. And it's simple, and you know, going spinnerbaits trailers, I'm going to use it on some spinnerbaits. Maybe not this color, but I've seen it used on that and a lot of different trailers. I predominantly put it, this is predominantly the only trailer I use on my chatterbaits, and it's never, you know, let me down. It catches fish. So that from missile baits, spunk shad. There's different sizes. I think there's a 3.5, there's a 4.5. They go up to a 6.5. The bigger ones, I might try some of those this spring. I'm kind of trying to branch out and try some bigger baits. I kind of stick with, you know, boy, that looks too big, but well, big baits catch big fish. So we'll see what that, if that happens for us this year.
Well, thanks for tuning in, and we'll link Triple F down in the description, as well as the channels we mentioned. You can find any of these baits we've talked about at the stores, on their website, but we always appreciate them being a sponsor for TAKAL, as well as their other sponsors that we've been picking up in the off season. Our first tournament is the Spring Thaw. It's a month-long tournament that's coming up shortly, and then the full schedule is on Facebook. Give it a look, and we'd love to see you at one of our events this year.
Yeah, I mean, a quick shout out again. Yeah, thanks Kevin for getting us here at Fin Feather Fur. Thanking them for sponsoring us. We are at the Rossford location. Hopefully, if you're viewing this, you're not just in this part of Ohio. Hopefully, we're branching out and get some other parts of Ohio. There's one in Middleburg Heights. There's one in Canton. There's one in Boardman. There's one in Sandusky and Milan, and there's one actually here in Rossford. That's one in Ashland. That was the other one. So there's different locations. We got a website. Check it out. Check out all these baits. You know, give them a try.
And one of their locations is next to Grandpa's Cheese Barn. And if you've never been to that, give it a look.
There you go.
Great stop. It's in the middle of nowhere, but you can go to get your fishing tackle, and then you can go get some cheese from Grandpa's Cheese Barn. It's a cool place.
And it's warming up here. You might get a chance to get out. Some of these baits will work well in the wintertime too.
That's for sure.
But for sure in the spring, get geared up and get yourself ready to go. Thanks for joining us.